welcome to the Unity Guides Expert Interview Series. My name is Clayton Stenson. I'll be your host today. This series is brought to you by Unity Guides Incorporated, where we help develop Unity within companies running on the entrepreneurial operating system. We do this through fractional integrator services and relationship coaching for the visionary and integrator. And the reason I started this interview series is that I've met some pretty amazing people in recent years, and the conversations we've had have been valuable to me. So I thought I should share them with other people to add value to them as well. Today's guest is Justin McCorkle. Justin is a system and soul coach from Texas. So welcome, Justin.
Thank you.
Awesome. So today, our topic is how to lead yourself. So Justin, why did you want to use this as the topic for our interview today?
Over the last year, I have gone through a lot of a personal journey around this topic, and it's helped me to tie together a lot of things from my life and a lot of things from my career. And what it really comes down to is I just feel like we spend so much time learning how to be good leaders for other people that sometimes we don't give ourselves the same grace and permission and devotion to try to figure out what we want out of life and how to pursue that path. So when we started talking about having this conversation, I just thought that might be a good way to kind of bring it all together. That doesn't necessarily relate completely to my work that I do with executive teams in system
Right.
coaching, but sometimes it does, because a lot of times you just find the same thing as we look to the roles that we have in individual organizations, that it doesn't fit us, and we need to know that, and leadership needs to know that, and we can lead a better life if we're honest with it. So there's some overlap, but really this just stemmed from our conversation with one another and kind of tying
Yeah.
into some passion.
Yeah. No, it's good. And when you were just talking, I was thinking, when you start your own business and become a solopreneur, like I had 4 years ago, and you are now, you better learn how to lead yourself, right? Or it's going to fail, right?
Absolutely.
So you made that transition recently. How does this reflect on that journey? Like, how does that work for you?
Well, I'll step through my professional life, I guess, real quick, that kind of
Yeah.
it makes sense.
Context.
Uh,
Yeah.
So right out of college, I took on my first full-time ministry position. I was a preacher, and over the course of 12 years, ended up building a pretty successful career, if you will, on preaching, and worked with some wonderful churches. We experienced some wonderful growth, and all of those things then led me into opportunities to do leadership trainings for churches around the country, talking about similar growth patterns and things of that nature. Then I was blessed with the opportunity to help start a cybersecurity company with a man that I had met while doing some of those leadership trainings. And we ended up working together, and he had started this company. And then I came in to help develop out the marketing, the sales, all that kind of stuff. And I did that for several years. And, despite the difficulties that come with any entrepreneurial adventure and the fears and the financial struggles early on and everything, we were blessed to eventually get that off the ground well, and it became profitable, and those good things happened. Then I spent some time working in mergers and acquisitions, did some advisory work, but primarily on the business development side. And then most recently, I just turned and started looking inwardly and trying to figure out exactly who I am and where my individual contribution best lies. And I used 10X is easier than 2X to kind of, it's a book by Dan
Right.
Sullivan and Ben
Yep.
Hardy, to kind of shape a process for myself to look at myself and to ask some really important questions, and did the hard work of trying to answer those questions, and eventually came out of it and saw that really I'm best in a role such as I'm in right now, and then found an opportunity to go and turn my life toward it. And so here I am now, working with executive teams with System and Soul to try to help them to understand how to have better business processes and how to invest in their leadership and their culture, and do all of those good things to help develop the organization. But really, beyond all of that, what I found is that, man, I'm really happy with my work right now. And I love it. I love going on site with a client. I love the hard work of thinking through difficult things and solving problems. And that is all a direct reflection of that process that I did for myself. But as I look back, I mean, anyways, I'll just say this. People, it probably makes some people squirm a little bit if you're a person of faith, which I am, and still work a lot with the church and everything. But preaching wasn't right for me. And I couldn't be honest with myself about that because there were aspects of it that I really enjoyed and I was really good at. But there were aspects of it that I was good at that I did not enjoy at all and felt a lot of shame and guilt over that.
Mm.
Then going into the entrepreneurial side, working in a cybersecurity company and everything, there were a lot of things that did not fit well with me at all, and ethical struggles and everything else that normal people face in the corporate world, and it just it might have looked good from the outside, but inside I was still having all these inward struggles. And anyways, just was not compassionate to myself about either of those things. Wasn't compassionate to myself about why I was having disappointment with the roles that I was in. I wasn't compassionate with myself about why I wanted more, or what I wanted. Asking myself even what I wanted was not a good thing. So, anyways, it's taken a lot to get to the point to where I've put even a fraction of the effort into leading myself that I was formerly putting into leading other people.
Mhm. There was a lot there. When you're talking, I'm thinking about my own journey, and there was a time where I was very hard on myself, like very hard on myself, and it was not helpful. It was counterproductive. Um, and I think even like making comparisons to other people, and wishing that I was more like X person, and so on and stuff like that. Um, but over the last, I'd say, 10 years, I've started to recognize that, you know what, I don't have to be like anyone else, right? I just need to be more of me, right?
Exactly.
And and become aware and comfortable in my own skin, and just trust. And I'm a person of faith too, so trust God that He has a plan, and that if I continue to press into Him, and continue to become more of me, that He's gonna take care of everything else. And I can happily say that, particularly the last 2 or 3 years, I think I've become so much more just comfortable. I know what matters to me, and I know what doesn't matter to me. And I know, we were chatting before we started, like, I've got 3 little kids, you've got little kids too. That's a big part of my why, is, to spend time with them and be a good father to them while building a business. Um, but that's not going to be the next person down the street that may not have any kids and doesn't want kids, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? It's like, they're made differently and have a different purpose. So, what are your thoughts on those things? I know that's not a very specific question, but I'm sure it prompted, thoughts in your perspective.
Yeah, I think the individual nature of it is really important. The question that I pose to leaders a lot of times when we're having conversations like this, I mean, some of these individuals are extremely successful. They've built very large businesses. They, whatever, all of the worldly metrics of success that you would give. And a lot of times they're miserable. They're not very happy. And you ask them, well, what do you want? And it reminds me of that scene on The Notebook, where he's asking her, "What do you want? What do you want?" repeatedly. It's really hard to answer that question sometimes because a lot of times when we start out, we think what we want is what we were told to want. You
Hmm.
want the successful career, you want a lot of money, you want to be highly thought of by your peers, and all this kind of stuff. And that may be true for some people, that is really what they want. But I think for a lot of people, it's not. What we really want is a very individual answer. It is usually not something that we're just going to be able to be handed by our society and for it to be accurate. So, getting down to the answer to that question of what we actually want is really important to having a wonderful life. It's having that abundant life. What do you really want? And how
Hmm.
does that, even when you answer the question of what you want, the path to get there, there can be multiple paths, many paths to get to that thing. But then you've got to go that second step, right? And actually pursue it. And then, even once you're pursuing it, you've got to also be willing to suffer for it. So, answering the question of what I want doesn't itself do anything, but it is a journey that most people never go on.
Hmm.
But if you are honest and you're like, I'm going to give myself permission to really ask this question, what do I want?
Hmm.
Then I'm going to be courageous enough to chase after it then I'm going to be determined enough to suffer for it, because you
Hmm.
will suffer. It all starts to make sense, and you're suffering for something that's worthwhile. So even the suffering itself doesn't feel like suffering for nothing, right? Let us not suffer as an evildoer. Let us, we can suffer for something that has purpose
Something
and
good. Yeah.
makes it feel different.
Yeah. Uh, One of my favorite quotes is, and I might butcher it, but along the lines of anything easy usually isn't worthwhile, and anything worthwhile usually isn't easy.
Mhm. Yes, absolutely. I tell my kids, and it sounds like a downer statement, but I try to wrap it in good stuff. I have a 13-year-old son in particular. He's my oldest, and I tell him a lot of times that life is suffering. The best you can do is to choose what you're going to suffer for. And if we go into our thinking with the understanding that we will not escape suffering,
Hmm.
going to be there. So the best thing we can do then is to chase a particular type of suffering. Like, I am going to go after what I want.
Hmm.
When I suffer, then it won't be the same suffering as someone who is not pursuing what they want, and they're just dealing with the suffering that everyone has in life. I mean, how can anyone escape suffering? We look at the people that we think should be the happiest on the planet, and by worldly metrics, right, they're famous, they've got a lot of money, everybody wants to be like them, all this admiration, and there in those places we find all of the suffering, and maybe it's a different type of suffering sometimes than you find at different stages of a person's life, or different economic status, or whatever else, but it's still suffering.
Hmm.
And I think that that tells us that there's no escaping this. Embrace it. Embrace it.
Hmm.
It's kind of like saying that I don't want to suffer, so I'm not going to go and do that run.
Hmm.
But if I've decided I'm going to suffer, I might as well go do the run and suffer through the run. It puts you in a different frame of mind. And now, at least through the suffering, you have something, hey, I'm proud of. I'm making progress. I'm losing weight. I'm gaining endurance, whatever you want to put in the blank there. It's just reinterpreting the pain, and I'm chasing a pain instead of running from it.
Yeah, that's good. It reminds me of, you can either do the pain of hard work or the pain of regret, right?
Absolutely.
I think, like, for me, a little bit of my journey. So 17, 18 years ago, I was really struggling uh, through life, was depressed, was, just really in what I would call hermit mode.
Mhm.
I just was go to work, play video games, sleep, repeat. Uh, I didn't um, I didn't answer the phone. Like, I was just really checked. I was in a really bad place, and you know it was it was unfortunate. And I remember I went to a video game store, and I was looking at a video game, and I was like, I'm gonna buy another video game, right? Like, but I was just running, right, from stuff that was going on in my life and inside of me. And I picked up another video game, and I was like, oh, this one looks cool, this will be good. And I just got this sense that I should stop building something in an imaginary world and start building something in the real world. And I,
Absolutely.
and I put the video game down. And, like, I'm not going to say that haven't played video games since, because it's still, something that I have to be careful of, because it's an escapism. It
Mhm.
can be an escapism thing for me. But that was a turning point in my life when I just decided I'm going to stop with the pain of regret, and I'm going to, suffer for something that's more meaningful. And I didn't figure it out immediately, and it wasn't like, bam, everything's good now. Right? Like, it's been 20 years of personal growth and facing hard things in myself and healing, and all of those things to get where I am now. And there's still plenty more to do, right, to overcome and to grow through. But I think a lot of people are medicating and following a path that does not satisfy them, but it's
Yeah,
maybe easy, you know.
absolutely. Absolutely. And there's a lot to dive into with all of that. Uh, well, escapism is huge for us all. It's a big temptation, especially I think when we're young and when we're in that midlife crisis type of point. It's because we're not happy, but we don't know what to do about it, and we don't feel courageous enough to pursue. Like, we don't know what we want, and then we probably lack the courage to pursue it anyways,
Mhm,
and we're still stuck on this idea that we're going to escape suffering, and we're
mhm,
not.
mhm,
So it's I want the easy life. This feels hard, but we don't realize the problem isn't the hard, it's the what hard. It's the fact that this is the hard that we have, and we really should be chasing a hard that more aligns with what we want.
mhm,
And it reminds me as well, Patrick Lencioni, he, of course, famous leadership guy, but
mhm,
talks a lot about the two components that are most important for effective leadership that make up like 77% of effective leadership is being inwardly sound and others focused. Well, it's for some people, maybe for myself, I will say that it's easier to be others focused than it is to be inwardly sound. So we
mhm,
spent some time talking about that component and how what happens when you're others focused and you're not inwardly sound, eventually you fall apart.
yeah,
You can't keep it up, and
taking
it's
time
like,
off.
yeah, we're beating ourselves up so much because we're doing all of this for other people. And then we're looking at ourselves and we're thinking, well, something's broken in me. I'll tell you, this is real truth here. While outwardly, when I was in ministry, outwardly, it just looked like I had it all together. I had the beautiful wife and young family and all this kind of stuff. But inwardly, I was really struggling, and no one knew that because I was others focused. I legitimately wanted the best for all of these people around me. I wanted to do the best for these churches and everything else. But I felt cursed. There was a time in my faith I really felt cursed by God that I was blessed to be able to give to others what I could never have, particularly things like peace and a good marriage and all of this kind of stuff. It was, and I look now and think about it as like, well, it's because I was trying to do right, right? I wanted to help other people, but I hadn't spent the time to look inwardly and really ask myself what I want, and then have that courage to chase it and go suffer for it.
Mhm,
And that's a path to disaster. We're going to fall apart when
mhm,
we're trying to be others focused without being inwardly sound. And what I find is a lot of people that are great leaders, we call them great leaders because they're doing these outwardly big things, right? They've got big teams or they're giving big speeches or whatever else, they're influencing people. They are in the same situation. They are not inwardly sound because they're not giving themselves that permission to really look and say, who am I? What do I want? How do I go get it?
mhm. Yeah, and I think people can sense that, right? Like at least people that are close enough to you can probably sense that, or the lack of that, or the reality of that. But I think when we're not inwardly sound, we tend to hold people at a distance, right?
Mhm.
Like I
Absolutely.
can relate. I was a
We have
pastor.
to protect our lie, right? That's the pride and shame cycle. We're
Yeah.
protecting our psyche and ourself and what we want people to think of us.
Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I was a pastor as well for 7 years. Not a preaching pastor, but more of a behind the scenes integrator type pastor. So I get it, right? Like there's a lot of pressure in that type of role, whether real or perceived, to be a
It's
certain
both.
way.
It's definitely both.
Yeah, but I think for me it was probably more perceived than real, but maybe not. But I remember leaving the ministry being it was very hard for me for two reasons. One is my value as a person was way too wrapped up in
Absolutely.
in that image that I had, or that serving in that way. um and um and then like it was nice though, because all of a sudden I felt this, like, after kind of got through the initial phase, it was nice because I was like, okay, I can just be me, right?
Mhm.
But what does that mean? What am I now, right? And it was a good season, but it was a hard season. And but yeah, over time, I became I think a better person, more at peace, more fulfilled and more me than I ever had been before. But I don't know what your experience was after leaving.
Oh, it was definitely identity crisis.
Yeah.
I mean, I had been in preaching for so long. I had never really known what life was like for a regular person, and
Mhm.
suddenly to be nobody didn't matter. The things that I was trying to do or pursue or whatever else, I was in a sea of people trying to do similar things. Right? We're going to go and build a business, and we're going to do all of these things. It's like, well, okay, get in line. There was a this is not good. Okay, I want to put that out there, but there is a deference given to people in ministry, preaching and everything else, where you're so surrounded by people that either they share your faith and they're holding you up because you're a champion of their faith in their mind, or they don't share the faith and you're in a situation where you're trying to win them in some way to Christ and and so the engagement is different, and it's almost like you've got the sea of people behind you rooting for you all the time as you're helping and battling in the world to try to bring light to darkness. And so you have this story that you're able to live in, and you do get very much tied up into that work, and then leaving that behind, and hey, nothing seems as meaningful when you're just trying to deal with the day-to-day stuff. And then you start questioning yourself in all these various ways about all the poor decisions that you've made or the lack of gratitude you had for the role that you were in.
Mhm.
Anyways, I go off and
It
on about all
is,
that stuff
right.
because there is a lot to talk about with that. But at the end of the day, your identity is not what you do, especially as a Christian. I mean, whether you're a preacher or you're not, or you're an entrepreneur or you're not, or you're any of those things you want to put into the blank, ultimately, the whole message of the gospel is that God sees you as you. God sees you as this individual child of his. And just like with our children, like I don't ultimately really care what my kids do. I want an abundant life for them, the same as God wants for us. And I want them to go down their unique path and find where they shine,
Mhm.
and then bring the best value to others through that.
Mhm.
But anyways, yeah, it's a long journey to get to that point to where you can just be
Yeah.
honest. And it took me a long time to just be able to be honest and say,
Yeah.
I don't want to be a preacher, because that's like you're not supposed to say that, right? It's such a thing. Like I remember this. I don't want to get off on the preaching too much and dominate our conversation with it, but there was this time, and it was probably the height of my career in preaching, and I was visiting with this other preacher who a little bit older than me, a decade or so older than me. He was a really great guy, but he was just going on and on about how much he loved preaching and how he felt so blessed to have this opportunity to be this champion of the kingdom of God and all of this kind of stuff. And of course, I smiled and like, yeah, yeah. And I walked away from that conversation, and inside I felt so low
Yeah.
because what I was realizing is that I don't have nearly the
Yeah.
joy in my heart to do this work that he does. And that just haunted me for
Yeah.
so long because it just felt like I'm supposed to feel like that and I don't feel like that. Something's wrong with me.
Mhm.
Well, the other answer that I wish that I could have been inwardly sound enough to get to was this isn't right for me.
Yeah.
Uh,
And that's okay.
yeah, it is. It is okay.
Totally okay. Right. And I think about the visionary integrator dynamic, and I know in system it's visionary operator. Um, it's that comparison. There was a season where I was like, oh, I wish I was like a visionary, like, so and so. And I was comparing, and I wasn't stepping into who I'm naturally am, and how I can add value in a different way. And at one point, all of a sudden, I was like, okay, this isn't. I don't need to be that, right? Like,
Mhm.
you know, God didn't make me to be that. I can be this, and it's just as valuable, right?
Yes.
Different but valuable. And like you were talking about your kids, I feel the same way. Like I'm 46 today is my birthday, and you know I've had to go through maybe 20 years of pain to arrive at a place where I feel confident in who I am and how God's made me. So with my kids, I want to help them arrive there much sooner. Right?
Absolutely.
like I'm watching them with eyes wide open, and I'm trying to understand what makes them tick. There's three of them. They're all very different, right? My middle child, I'm playing Lego with him right now, and I'm noticing, holy man, this kid is good with details, right? Like I'll find a piece and I'm like we're trying to build a, without like buying the set, we're trying to build a Millennium Falcon, Star Wars, right? And I'm like, Luke, do we need this piece? And he's like, yeah, we need 12 of those. And I'm like, what? I look at the list and I'm like, holy, we do need 12 of those. Like, how does he remember that? He's 5, right? And then I asked him another one, do we need this one? Yeah, we need 17 of those. And I look at the list and it says 17. And I'm like, how does that, like, he has a gift for details. He's also very kind and loving, compassionate. And then my older one, he's a born leader, right? He is charismatic. Wherever he goes, people are following him everywhere he goes, right? He's not into the details, probably more ADHD, visionary type, likely, but like entrepreneurial, like, so I'm just watching and trying to figure out who are these guys. And I want to encourage them to discover more of who they are so that they can get into something that they're better suited for quicker. Now, I'm not going to control it, but I'm
Yeah.
going to help them, and I'm going to ask them questions, and but I'm diligently observing and trying to understand how
Well,
God's made it, right?
I love that. That is exactly my thought process as well, is to try to help my kids get faster to where it took me so long to get to.
Mhm.
Just to reference some of the things that I've worked through to get to that point. I mean, you could put a lot of counseling and stuff on that, but that's not really what I mean. I mean, um, think about some of the things we do with our teams to try to figure out what is going to help us to know where the people fit on our teams. I mean, everything from DISC and working genius and all that kind of stuff. So if we back up and we say, what do I want? Then we start trying to get to the root of that question. I mean, maybe for some people, it's like, I don't want any debt and I want to be able to travel. So you're going to end up at the point maybe to where you say, I need a remote type of position so that I can live in an RV and be moving constantly around the country. And, that's totally fine. You got to be able to embrace that my path looks different than somebody else's path. It gets even more complicated when you add in marriage, right? Because now you've got two people and trying to figure out what each of them wants and then find some compromise or way to work those things together. But basically, go through all of those assessments for yourself with fresh eyes and compassion, and deal with yourself the same way you would compassionately deal with someone else. Imagine that you had a great mentor that was working with you. Be your own mentor if you have to. Get mentors as well, certainly, but be your own mentor if you have to, and start dealing with yourself with that kind of compassionate, interested approach. Who
Mhm.
are you? And design life backwards. This is where I'm trying to get. One of the things that is discussed in 10x is easier than 2x is imagine 30 years from now that you are receiving all of these accolades. You are at the pinnacle of where you've wanted to get to career wise with all of these things. You just close your eyes and see yourself there. Then ask, what are the people praising you for?
Mhm.
It puts you in a situation where you're starting to get to screw up. That's all right. Um, Puts you in a
It's a
situation
good
where you're
point.
starting to get down to a truth in yourself. Um, it may not be the thing that you're doing.
Yeah.
Even if there might be some overlap, it's probably a slice of that. And of course, that's part of the 10x season 2x is identifying the 20%, right? And eliminating the 80%, and then doing that over and over and over again throughout your life so that you're getting more and more focused on that unique, most unique portion of you.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. I had a friend, this would have been 16, 17, 15 years or somewhere in there. She's very similar to what you just said. She said, I think she read it in a book, start with the end in mind. She said that imagine, well, I think it was actually write your own obituary, right? Like, what do you want people to be saying at your funeral in how many years? And then intentionally begin to build that, right?
Yes.
It's a little different than what you're saying, but I think it's similar. Like, what do you want, right? Like for me, geographically free is part of my dream, right? And not have to be in one location, be able to travel we homeschool our kids, so I'd love to be able to take them to places and still work, right? But be like next year, EOS conferences in Washington, D.C. I want to take them there. I'll
Mhm.
go to the conference, but my wife can take them to the White House and the Lincoln Memorial, and like they can see history and do things like that. But I can't do that if I walk a path that everyone else is walking. I have to go a different way. And is it possible? Yeah, it is. I'm seeing that now as I'm 4 years into my business, that a lot of things that I probably didn't think were possible 4 years ago, I'm starting to realize are, if I stay the course and I suffer, through a lot of hard things. Like it's not easy, right? What I've been doing every year has been a challenge, but every year I grow, right? And there's nowhere to hide when you're a solopreneur. Like if this is going to be successful, you have to grow, right? You
Yeah.
have to get better at everything, right? Or you have to delegate, right? And hire people. And this year I have been able to hire a couple contractors to help me with different things. And that's been great. And I'm able to focus a little more on the things I'm really good at. So
Yeah,
um,
that hiring piece is really important, right? Because it's who, not how. And the answer a lot of times is not how do I do this? As even as a solopreneur, I mean, uh, an executive assistant, virtual assistant, or whatever else. I mean, it's like a superpower to me. I feel like I can do so much more, and it's not the time. It is really simply about I hate this stuff. There are things I just hate doing. I
yeah,
remember at one point in our cyber company, I hated CRMs. I despise a CRM, and much more so than is reasonable probably for a person to despise it. I despise it. And I had this wonderful EA, and finally I just was honest with myself to say, I really hate this stuff. It doesn't take me that long to do, but I hate it. So what I did is I asked her, can we just block out an hour a week? And all I'm going to do is you're just going to ask me questions about every one of the deals, and I'll just talk to you because I love having
you
conversations.
type it in. Yeah.
So an hour a week from that point forward was on my calendar where I was just essentially dictating the updates that needed to go into the CRM. But that removed so much of what I hated. It was amazing. It made my week so much better because I wasn't thinking about, for the 20 minutes every day I need to jump on and type in some updates into the CRM or
Yeah.
whatever. I didn't have
Yeah.
to do it anymore. And so it took this thing that I dreaded every single day and
Mhm.
just made it, hey, I'm going to have a coffee with this wonderful executive assistant that I have, and we're going to have a conversation. And all she would do is just ask me questions about each of the things that she went through and just start typing and
Would
run.
she just look through your calendar and the deals and, just ask questions about your meetings and stuff like that? Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
that's it. And so basically it's like spoiling yourself, and that's the negative side. Like there have been many times, most of the time in my life, I would say I grew up in a blue collar family, working in the woods, logging company, all that kind of stuff. That's like spoiling yourself. That's, don't be weak type of thing. Go and do your
hmm
work. Should be
suck it up.
hard. Shouldn't like
Yep.
work and all this kind of stuff. But when we get away from that and just say, hey, you know what? I don't like doing this. I'm going to hire someone to do it. It
Mhm.
adds so much value to our life because
Mhm.
hopefully we're trying to hire people that love the stuff that we're talking about. They like the
Yeah, yeah,
organization
yeah,
stuff.
yeah. Yeah, I have a
And
great example. I hired a bookkeeper in January, and she cleaned up my bookkeeping. and and at the end we sat down. She's like, "Hey, I don't know how to say this, but you're not allowed to do bookkeeping anymore. Like all you can do is send invoices and that's it." And I'm like, I'm good with that. Right? Like I don't like bookkeeping, right? I'm reasonably detail oriented, but I don't know how QuickBooks works. Like I didn't learn it properly and I don't want to, right?
I
Like,
am the most team-oriented solopreneur. I mean, because I'm a solopreneur, right? I have my own S corp and everything, but I have a, a great accountant, bookkeeper that does all the stuff that I hate doing. I have a wonderful EA that I work with, and she handles all this other stuff I hate doing. I have a coach partner who is mostly responsible for my business development because I'm kind of over doing the biz dev thing, and I don't really like doing it. And so pulling in those different, and I will add more. I promise you, I will add more. I'll eventually want to write a book, and I am not going to do all the stuff I don't like. I will hire someone to help me through that whole
Yeah.
process. I can just do what I want.
Yeah.
It's, but the joy that brings to my life, but even better, the quality of the work that I'm able to put out is tremendously better than what it
Yeah.
would be if I was fighting with all the stuff that I just didn't like, even if it didn't take me that much time. But
Yeah.
the mental drain that it takes for me to do this stuff that I hate saps my energy for the stuff that I love.
Mhm.
So instead, tell you, when it comes to my work now, I love the stuff that I do. And if I
Mhm.
don't, I try to
Mhm.
recognize that and start plotting a course to getting rid of it.
Mhm. Yeah, that's good. That's good. So that's more from the, from the entrepreneurial side of things. You know, we work hard and pay the price so that we can do that,
Mhm.
right? Like at some point we can start farming things out. If you're not if you're listening, you're not, in that world, right? Like you should still stop and think, have a clarity break, think about, what do you want in your life? Are you truly happy doing this role? If you're not, then can you do it a different way and make it better? Or do you need to change? And I think, just in the way of wrapping up, I think during COVID, a lot of people were forced to stop and think. And so that I think that's why there was this great resignation of
Mhm.
people that were like, what? Why do I work at this place? Right? Like, I don't actually like being here and I don't like my job. And, I'm going to rethink my life and go and, do something different or find another place to work. And that's kind of what happened to me. Right. I was, had some time off and thought about it. I'm like, you know what? I think God has a plan for me. I think I can take my pastor's heart and my integrator mind and I can go and build a business. And I felt God calling me to do something different. And it was scary. And the first year or two was hard, right? But I'm happy. I'm happy I made that decision and suffered for something bigger and something that was better suited for who I am. So yeah, any last thoughts before we wrap up, Justin?
Yeah, I want to get ahead of a criticism that people jump up with a lot is like, you're never going to love everything about work.
No.
And I agree. I agree. There's always going to be parts that you're not going to enjoy doing, and they pop up, issues pop up, and all those types of things. But that
Yeah.
doesn't, you shouldn't be pursuing what you love.
Yeah.
And what you said is absolutely right. Entrepreneurship is not the answer for most people. And
It's
it is
hard.
not, and it is not about better or whatever else. It is 100% about you as an individual and what your makeup is. And I'll tell you, if you're not given to that, then you're going to hate it. Your life will be miserable. You will not improve your life by becoming an entrepreneur if you're not of the entrepreneur's heart. And that's perfectly fine. Keep it individual, be honest with yourself,
Hmm.
start from the end and work backwards, and be courageous in what you're doing, because you only get one time here.
Hmm.
It's over in just a few years. None of us live very long. So try to spend your time building something that you do love, and you're going to be able to help a lot of other people because of that.
Hmm.
It's not selfish. It is the most loving thing that we can do toward our creator. He created us for something. Let's go find out what it is. It's a loving thing we can do for other people, because when we get in that zone, we can add so much value to other
Hmm.
people's lives and to society and all those types of things. Where
Hmm.
we don't add value is when we're
Yeah, that's
stuck
good.
living someone else's story.
Yeah. 4 years into my entrepreneurial, I can tell you it's not the answer. It's hard. I have more problems now than I've ever had in my entire life, right? More issues to deal with than I've ever had. Um, but I love it because I can add value and I can help people, right? On bigger problems, bigger impact, right? So thank you, Justin. This has been really good. If someone wants to learn more about you and what you do, how should they get in touch with you?
Well, you can certainly reach out to me via email, justin@leanleadersinc.com. And leanleadersinc.com is our website there.
Yeah.
And yeah, basically, we help leadership teams. I mean, I work with companies and help them move from founder led to team led. Sometimes it's just fast growth mode and trying to help them get systems and still invest in their culture, make that a priority. It's leadership development, it's culture development, and all of that. And we'll have to talk about that another time. But if you're
Yeah.
trying to bring
Awesome.
some order to your life, if this thing that was supposed to bring you freedom has now made a prison for you, we're going to help you find a path out of that.
On behalf of our viewers, thank you for joining us today again. And thank you for sharing your passion on this topic. I'm sure it's going to be impactful. If today's interview added value to you, please subscribe for more interviews with experts in the world of business.
Thank you.